Hi, I'm Sarah Beth Goer.
And I'm Jennifer Jill Araya.
Welcome to the Crafting Audiobooks podcast, where we discuss the art and craft of audiobooks, and we aim to go deep quick.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Crafting Audiobooks podcast. I am so excited to announce that our guest today is audiobook narrator, engineer, and director. Yes, she wears a lot of hats, Jennifer Blom. Jen, welcome to the Crafting Audiobooks podcast.
Hey, both of you. Glad to be here.
Glad to have you. Just a quick note before we get started. My name is Jennifer Jill Araya, and our guest today is Jennifer Blom. We've got two Jennifers today, so to avoid confusion, if Sarah or Jen refer to Jennifer, that's going to be me. And if either Sarah or I say Jen, that's referring to our delightful guest. So Jen, talking to me, Jennifer. All right. Because we are a podcast that likes to go deep quick, even though I did have a long intro there, let's get to our first question, which is, Jen, you are an audiobook engineer, as I mentioned, and I would love to know your thoughts. Is audiobook post-production work an art, or is it a science, or is it both?
I mean, I feel like that's almost a trick question. Like, you're testing me, aren't you? Now, I do think, as most people out there probably do, that it's both. If you think about a movie editor, someone who's working on Scorsese's latest masterpiece, they're obviously going to be using a computer and doing the science by running things to make it sound better. But if they don't do the timing right, it's all for naught, because no one's really going to be like, oh, geez, that sounded great, but, the timing sucked, is what they're going to feel is the actor's problem. So that's where it kind of becomes a thing. You want to help the performer make the part sizzle that they wanted to sizzle from the get-go, and not change that with your editing, just enhance their initial instincts.
I'm just curious about the craft of that, because it does seem like such a fine line. I think you put it so well, of enhancing what the performance is already doing rather than drastically changing it. But how do you skill-wise ensure that that's what you're doing, as opposed to just imposing a different vision?
Yeah, I guess the hats we wear as a editor, at least in my opinion, are the hats of the listener, the hat of the director, the hat of the author, and the hat of the performer. And I guess if you're doing one of those Venn diagram charts, where do they overlap? You want to find the sweet spot in the middle. The listener will not disengage because that pause was too long, but the narrator obviously put that there for a moment. So don't shorten it down to 1 second if it needs that 2 seconds to breathe, but also 3.5 to 4 seconds is a bit long. So there is that fine balance between what does the end listener expect, what does the initial instincts that the narrator has made during the process been, right? Because if all of your pauses are super long,
maybe it wasn't deliberate.
Right. If it's always when you're switching from narrator to character voices, that needs to be tightened up. And especially with duet and multicast, when people are recording separately, although everyone, we wish you would record them together for a better experience, because that is acting. But if you do record them in the wild, or, you're just recording the lines that are going to be inserted, you have to trust that the engineer is going to make that sound like you recorded at the same time. And if that's not happening with your post-production team, you probably need to find one that remembers that it is an art as well as a science, because that's where you'll know the difference of your skill set pretty quickly at that point. It's just you wouldn't necessarily use a proofer that speaks American English and doesn't really know any British English to proof a British English book, because then they'll be actually, it's lieutenant, not lieutenant. And then actually, you're wrong. And true story, that actually happened to me because I didn't know, but I wasn't rude about it. I just marked it. And they're like, no, that's right. And I'm like, lesson learned. It's kind of like mischievous and like mischievous. Like I learned that lesson as a narrator, and I learned this other lesson as a post-production team many years ago. But yeah, I think it's just being humble about, not taking over the project, but working kind of in kismet with the whole team to make sure that every voice is heard.
It seems like, very much from the outside looking in, it seems like doing that kind of editing craft on a multicast title would be really tricky. Can you talk some about your process and how you do make it sound like all of the narrators are recording at the same time in the same place, even when they're not?
Yes, I can talk about it, which would be really weird if I'm like, no, but we can observe silence while we think about what I might have said. But I can definitely talk about it. And the thing is, you have to trust that the narrators first honor that there's somebody else talking in the scene. Just like if you were doing animation, usually you would have a director at that point. But since we self-direct a lot of it, we have to wear that hat. But it's like, what do you think you're going to receive from the other person at this moment? And how do I honor that with my delivery? And some people are better at that than others because it's a skill set like anything else that you can hone. So like, even though you've done a book, I'm not saying you'll never get there, kid, you're done. But it is something where that has to happen correctly first. And we will, as my team at Reaping Audiobooks, like I've told them this, but it's like, if something feels completely off, we'll just mark it as a pickup. If it's something like there's an energy shift, sometimes it's just, okay, let it breathe a little bit more before someone starts yelling. And sometimes they are yelling and the forceful intent needs to be closer to, so it feels interrupty. So it's that kind of thing. Like, what is the subtext of the scene and how can I edit the dialogue to most be that? It is a lot of work. It is like, even if it was directed, a roll cut like that or a insertion like that makes me wear the director hat a little bit more too, to help facilitate that process.
This is all so rich, and I'm debating, like, do I ask more follow-up questions because I have them? Or do I go to
Well,
the
you better
next
ask them. This is a
because...
rapid fire interview, so if you have them, ask them quickly.
We've explored a lot here about the art of the timing and how that gets even trickier when you're blending performances. I'm curious if there are other elements of the art side of engineering.
Yeah. So loudness comes into mind sometimes, like you kind of hit the beginning of a sentence a little harder. Maybe it was a punch point or something of that nature, but like you've started talking again and it like tears the person out of it. You just need that first word lowered. That's a thing that we can sometimes help with. Sometimes we just have you do a pickup if it was complete. Like you sounded like you were in a different space entirely for that moment. But other than that, it's when there's only one take to choose from, that is kind of where we're limited. You find a little bit more if you're doing a roll edit, which is basically like your just in case somebody that's listening doesn't know, but like if you just keep it rolling the whole time and someone's marking up your script, if you have a director, there's a little bit more like, because there's two takes, then I can be like, okay, even though in studio we thought the second take was correct, the way it started wasn't. So then it's splicing the two takes together, like in a Frankenstein way or Frankenstein monsters way, to be technical, everyone. I know it was, anyway, but the fact is, like, those type of things add to it as well. So sometimes we don't have to do anything like much beyond making sure you said the right thing. Sometimes people have a natural rhythm that we're keeping them to, and everything is in sync. So like that is in my book, like I'm the conductor just easily like swinging my baton going like, hey, this all sounds amazing. I don't need to touch very little. Oh, well, we could sizzle it there, but that's about it. That's all I need to do. Just you sizzle. I'm just going to say you're eating this sandwich. I've never seen a conductor eat a sandwich, but you know what I mean. While performing. I'm sure.
I'm sure conductors eat sage.
Yes, just to be clear, I just meant like while he's up there, he's or she is not eating a sandwich. They are not doing that. Okay. Usually, unless it's a bit. Okay. Does that answer your kind
of? It does. Thank you so beautifully. Could you please, for us, speak a little bit to how your post-production experience has influenced your craft work as a narrator and vice versa?
Yeah, sure. I've always been a huge fan, even when I was in theater, of being involved in both sides of the art. So the technical side, I did audio for live performances for theater and stage managing and all that. It makes you not take anybody in the process for granted, and it lets you appreciate the collaboration that this art really is. And I think sometimes we forget it because we're the only one in the booth recording. And so we're like, oh, it's just an isolated incident. It is. But no, it's someone's going to listen to that. And the listener is part of that, experience too. If no one listens, then have we really done work, right? But the end listener is important. And even if it just goes to one person, mind you, it still is someone who got to have the joy of sharing this experience with the rest of the team. So I'm a huge believer in that. And doing both helps me. I always talk about finding a little sizzle from other people. And when I'm directing someone who's amazing or has a really good technique in the booth or any of that, I can take those little nuggets, pearls of wisdom, learning from my peers and implement it in my day-to-day, which just makes me a better human and a better performer.
That makes so much sense. We all can learn from listening to audiobooks, and it's like you listen even more deeply than someone who's just hearing the end product.
Yeah, and also I work in one of my other hats that I did not mention, but as a director, as an engineer, record engineer, which is slightly different than editing engineer, but I get to talk to the authors as well. And so having those discussions about their works, like in our break times in between, helps me understand their process and what they love about it, what their pain points are, but also honor their baby. Like, that's kind of like, you're like, okay, this is their baby. They've worked on it for a decade or 5-6 years. Let's honor it. Let's all do the best we can to make sure that the way it lives out in the world for a real long time is the best we can make it.
I love that so much. And I love what you said at the very beginning of that answer, where you were talking about how working on both sides of the mic in this situation helps you understand what a collaborative community audiobooks actually is. I mean, like you said, we think of audiobooks as being a very solo endeavor as narrators, but it really is not. The producer, the engineer, the proofer, the editor, everyone involved is our colleague and our co-creator on the project. And I do think it can be easy to forget that, but also really helpful to remember that.
Yeah, if I can just go to that orchestra thing one more time, but the producer, when they set the scene, when they tell you this person's okay, I don't know orchestra enough for this. Okay, we're just going to skip the orchestra stuff, but I'll just say it in the plain language. I was like, this is going to go bad, and there's orchestra people in the room. I'm not doing it. But so basically, if we're taking it into the theater world, the director set what they want, the producer that hires the director, they share a journey of what they want that end product to be. And they've talked to everybody else involved in the author, the playwright, whatever. And they all try to honor that experience first before it even gets to anything technical, before we've recorded anything. They have a clear vision. And when you all agree on what that vision should be, that's when the beauty comes into play. When you just go solo and don't ask any questions and just, got this, you're an improv actor and that's fine. But that's not necessarily honoring the whole process. That is honoring you in the moment. And that's why it's called improvisation and not, staged reading. I don't know. Both of my tried metaphors are failing, but you get the point. Yeah, it was totally cohesive.
The point's definitely getting across of how being
Excellent.
aware of the collaborative whole can, does matter and make a difference. Although I might argue that for narrators, a huge part of our collaboration is trusting casting, trusting when we're cast and when we're not cast, because that when we show up for the audition and we're solo visioners mostly, for the most part. Like there might be a little bit of directorial guidance about what they're looking for, but then we take that and we run and we go, here's my vision of what you've given me. And
100%.
then the producer and the author, most commonly it's those two people, are then saying, okay, which narrator fits our cohesive vision. So
100%.
yeah.
And I think like any casting, it's always going to be subjective, and everybody could, like, anybody in that group, if you were 5 or 6 people that get to that final round, anybody could do the book. It's just who will do it the most justice and who will like be the one that's going to honor the vision, like you were saying, Sarah. And I think sometimes we get really precious and hurt when we're not cast. And like, I hear everybody, I felt it, but the fact that we get into the room, especially in our industry, when we're invited to audition, that means they already believe in us. That means they already believe this journey that we could take them on is a potentially amazing fit. But there's sparkle in each of us that makes other things shine. We can't all make the same thing shine, but we can make other things shine. So like, just keep trusting the process and go with it.
It's also exciting to me when you point that out, that like some of the selection process of whom they're going to audition is them playing with vision, is them saying like, okay, well, I think this, like, I don't know, like we're solidifying our vision and it could go this direction or that direction. And let's bring several like just awesome options together to play and explore. And so we are, when we audition, a part of the vision process, by just offering like, here's material for you to play with to help solidify the cohesive vision.
Right.
Jen, you have no way of knowing this, but before you joined our call, Sarah and I were actually talking about an audition that Sarah's been offered that she's feeling like she's maybe not the right fit for. And as I'm listening, I don't know if you're getting this, Sarah, but I'm like, Sarah, you just need to go for it.
Go for it. Do it.
Trust the producer's vision of why they reached out to me.
Exactly.
Yeah. And like, exactly. It's the collaboration. Like the only time that may not work is, and I still think you should put in the audition in these cases, like if they've asked you, but if you do sign something in your preliminary prep where you're like, hey, just so you know, like I'm happy to audition. I did audition, but like I did note this on this page while I was just doing my cursory scan that I may not be a great fit for. And like, but if you decide that if the author loves me that much, and like, that's cool, but I just wanted to make sure I pointed out in this part of the process so that you know, and we're all on the same page. Like, it's collaboration, it's working together, it's communication, it's all the things that we wish we had more of when we're sitting alone in our booth. So let's honor it when we can do it and when we can communicate with each other.
Absolutely. Well, Jen, we've talked a lot about your narration and we've talked a lot about your engineering, but we've not talked much about your work as a director. So I'd like to look at that a little bit. Would you be able to share with us, or could you please share with us, some of what you have learned by directing, whether that's authors or other narrators or both, that you now apply to either your own narration work or your post-production work?
Yeah. For me, what came out of it is you can overplan. When you're sitting there, you can overplan and you can try and control every part of this like situation. And when you do that, you stunt some of your journey in the booth. Now, what I mean by that is, if I write down, okay, I'm feeling this in the moment, like, and I'm not willing to let it go if I am like sitting behind the like microphone in the booth, that's too stringent. Now, is it okay to plan what your journey is? Yeah. But it also needs to be okay for you to be like, oh, but how I just delivered that line. Kind of like when you're in a play, like if someone gives you a different line read back and you're all of a sudden like, but I've always said it this way, you're going to sound ridiculous. You need to honor what came before. And since you're playing all the parts, that might change your delivery is all I'm here to say. Like and the other part of it is just the reminder when in that process that every emotion can be expressed in a myriad of ways. So anger doesn't have to be yelled. Anger can be removed, reserved, detached almost, and just almost nothing to give away anger. But the fact that there's nothing there to give it away gives it away more. And so finding the balance of what sweetens the sound in the way that you want it to is been a really cool experience, because I get to play with my fellow performers and be like, well, I see what your intent there was. So like, I'm going to honor that. I don't try and change how they've interpreted text, but if I do hear that they're going angry and that's how they're interpreting it, unless it's completely off base, I'm gonna be like, how else can we express that? Because even if I feel like they're feeling a different emotion in that moment, we're not usually always cleanly in one emotion or another. Like, have you ever been angry at someone but made a joke in the middle of it because you are so angry, but like the way you're expressing it is like a wit sardonic, like, so it's funny, everyone's laughing, but the subtext is clearly something else is going on. So we're never just in one boat. You can be angry and really sad underneath. The subtext can change. And like, it's a percentage, just like most things in this world. You are never cleanly one thing, but you can be a percentage of a bunch of different things at any given moment of time. And it changes, it evolves, as all humans do, and we just get to honor that. So that's what I've loved most about the directing experience.
That's a beautiful thought. I know that there have definitely been scenes that as I was prepping it ahead of time, not reading it out loud, it sort of hit me one way. And then I get in that moment where I'm actually putting voice and energy behind those words, and it just hits totally differently.
Yeah.
I think you're right that being open to the moment while also honoring our prep work is a fine balance, but is really important.
And it honestly makes our job more fun, just to put that out there. Because if we're not that in tune to what we're saying, then we're not in the moment, existing in those places and going on the journeys. That is the fun part of being a storyteller. So we want to make sure that we're having fun, even in the moments that are painful, because we know that that is going to make the bright moments shine even better because we've let the dark happen.
That's a life lesson there.
Pearls to live by.
We have reached our very last question of the interview, and this is a question that we all answer.
Okay.
The question is, what's exciting you about the craft right now today? And Jennifer, I invite you to respond first.
Sure. So when we're recording this interview, it's about a month after Banned Book Week. But an experience that I had during that week has stuck with me this long that it's still what I'm kind of thinking about and excited about. So the ending weekend of Banned Book Week, I had a delightful time on the Cincinnati bookstore crawl, which was independent bookstores all over Cincinnati, where I live, opened up for like a scavenger hunt type thing. And you went from one bookstore to the next, and I saw readers and book lovers and audiobook listeners, even of all types, at these bookstores. It was so delightful. And one of the bookstores had a sticker that I bought, and it's on my laptop, that says, "We lose ourselves in books. We find ourselves there too." And so that's maybe just a little bit of background to describe, I guess, what I'm really excited about is that books allow us to embody perspectives and lived experiences of people who are very different from ourselves. And they also allow us to see ourselves and to know that who we are and what we are and how we relate to the world, whatever form that might come in, is okay. That visibility in literature. And I love that audiobooks expand that even more by allowing people who don't eyeball read super well and need that audio format to be welcomed into that same, inclusive, really soul-confirming space of books. And every time I look at that sticker on my laptop, I think of that bookstore crawl and all of the readers that I saw that weekend and just feel really lucky that I get to do this work. So, yeah, that's what's exciting for me.
Well, that was beautiful and moving. Right before this interview, I was like, I don't know about this last question we asked. I'm getting kind of tired of it. Should we change it? And then you answer like that. I'm like, well,
I guess we're keeping it forever.
Well, thanks. I seriously, that sticker, I can't actually look at it right now because it's on the outside of my laptop and I'm looking at my laptop. It's open, but it just, every time I see it, it's like, ooh, big warm fuzzies.
Beautiful. Cool. Well, the guest is now going to look dweebish in comparison because that was an amazing answer. But no, I what excites me about what we're currently doing is very similar to what Jennifer just said, but it's also the fact that the collaboration is becoming even more pronounced. And I know, like, some people are like, oh, it's getting so audio drama-ish or whatever. But, like, if we take it as a consideration of, like, audio film, like, actually feeling like you're on a journey with someone and even more getting taken into this other world, it makes the things Jennifer just described even more powerful because you get the visceral reaction to being in a different story, in a different person's shoes, because sound has that power to transform you. And I like this single narrator format. I mean, I do it all the time, but I love when a good multicast is done with great sound design. I think there's a lot of joy in that experience too. I think the only caveat to that is, like, I hope they don't make it so, like, watered down by, like, trying to cut corners, that it loses some of that joy because everyone's still working in isolation. So I hope that that will continue because I think hearing somebody else's voice with multiple voices makes it even more powerful. And you spend, 6 hours to 10 hours with these people, and it's so much more intimate. And you can pause it and you can absorb and take in all the love and all of the heartache and all of the different opinions. And you get stronger in your connection to the world. You get more empathetic. You get, more joy by even just experiencing someone else's joy. And I love that for everyone.
I agree. I love the multicast audiobook format. I mean, there is something about a really good, well-cast, incredibly performed single narration book that will never be surpassed by multicast, in my opinion.
My opinion, too.
However, a really well-done multicast, even with or without sound effects, but, a really well-done multicast can just be incredible.
It just hits different, as the kids, I think, still say. They may not. I may be like 10 years too late for that description. But yeah, I think the TLDR version of all of that is keep doing good work that matters in any format that you choose, be storytellers, and enjoy the ride.
100%. Sarah, what about you? What's exciting you about audiobooks today?
Well, I was thinking about, we talk a lot on the podcast about how audiobooks are this beautiful collaboration process. And then we, enhanced that discussion about the collaboration even more deeply today. And we usually talk about it from the lens of, like, it started with the writer and there's this, like, beautiful, well-crafted work that we're all looking to honor. And I have been chewing on, yes, and what about when the craft of the writing falls a little short, because we often in this industry get to work on books that aren't as well written as others, which is very understandable. Craft is extremely difficult. And also we're working in an industry where sometimes something sells well because of like the heart it has and not the craft skill necessarily. And that's what listeners are connecting to. And so what I've been thinking about that's exciting to me so when I get to work on a project that isn't as well crafted, still deeply honoring the story, honoring the heart the author put into it, honoring the heart that the listeners are connecting to in it, and getting to use our skill set, maybe even like we're filling in more gaps than we would normally fill in. It reminds me, Jennifer, of what you're talking about it with engineering, of sometimes you're listening to the performance and you're like, yeah, like I just add a little sizzle here, but like it's happening. And other times you're like, oh, we got to go in.
Jen, everybody.
I meant Jen.
Just in case anyone's confused.
Yeah, I don't do engineering. Jen doesn't.
Just to extra confuse me, your name is Jennifer on the Zoom. So.
Oh, sure. Blame me.
Sarah did mean Jen.
Oh, funny.
Yes, getting to use our skill to honor this, fill in those gaps and honor the story in a way that I really like to. Jen just changed her Zoom name to Jen with a winky face.
I apologize. Chaos has ensued.
We're in the midst of an interview and everyone involved is cracking up.
Yes. To use our craft to fill in what might be missing pieces on the page, but that we sensed were there, and really be of assistance in that way and support and offer that with what we do. And so to see it as like a cool opportunity to be in collaboration.
That is a great answer. And I'm sorry for interrupting it with my jokes.
Oh, no, this has been so much fun. I love this is how I experience you as a human, too. Like this mix of like total entertainment with thought and depth. So it's been a fun ride.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So I want to piggyback off what Sarah said. So we've interviewed Scott Brick on the podcast before, and I've heard him share in coaching settings a metaphor that I think goes with what you're saying really well, Sarah. And that metaphor is that we are ballroom dancing with the manuscript or the author's craft. And in ballroom dancing, sometimes you have a really, really strong partner, and all you have to do is be along for the ride. So that would be when the author's craft is like totally on point and you just have to do almost nothing, because as long as you say the words in the right order and honor the author's punctuation. I mean, I've had books that it's like, I literally just had to read because it was so well written that everything was there. You know, that's the really strong partner in ballroom dancing. And then sometimes we have a partner in ballroom dancing, like you said, that the heart is there for sure. And there's a reason that it's being put into audio, and there will be listeners who will love it, but the craft or the skill is not quite as strong. And so in that case, we have to do a lot more work. But sometimes those projects can actually be more rewarding because we have to put so much extra into it. You know, the ballroom dancing analogy. So
yeah, like someone has to lead, right? So sometimes you're the lead as the narrator, and sometimes the author's the lead, and you're just, like you said, doing the steps. Mm-hmm. One other thing that I just have, a little nugget. I always say this when I'm listening for, like, in tech stuff. It used to be like when I was getting yelled at on the phone when I used to work on phone service. I always said this thing called listen for the 10%. And that's whatever their issue is and what I can help them with, right? And I think that analogy goes back to what the listener or reader is getting out of a book, right? The 10% of the ride that sticks with them. They won't remember that one scene that was a little awkward, They won't remember like, that typo if they're reading with their own eyeballs as opposed to, our eyeballs as far as us giving them the voice. But like they will remember the emotional journey that they took with us. So, and that's easier to play than worrying so much about if that last sentence made complete sense. Because as long as you're emotionally invested in the moment, it will have read just fine.
Yeah. I love it, Sarah. Thanks for sharing.
And thanks for building on it, Jennifer and Jen.
Well, we had to say what you meant to say before you were rudely interrupted with my jokes.
Well, thank goodness, because I didn't know if I was, adequately saying what I was trying to say, and you fixed it for me. It was great.
I mean, we both understood, so I'm sure all the other
I guess I said it well enough
there
to get across.
Yes.
For sure.
Just as when we have a poorly crafted book,
we get there eventually, love.
Tying it all back together.
I do want to add one more point, which is that even though it feels to you like the book is so well crafted that all you're doing is reading, or all you're doing is following, I would say you're not. That's actually a part of the craft too. Sure. Similarly in ballroom dancing, being able your partner's so good at leading, all you need to do is follow. Well, actually letting go and following is also part of the art.
Really, really hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You need skill to follow properly, but
yeah. To release that much control and let that story come through you without interfering with it is actually also really it feels to you like all you're doing is reading, quote unquote. But I think there's craft and skill to that element as well.
You're right.
All you're doing is reading with 10 years experience in doing that.
True. Point taken.
It reminds me of Carey Mulligan, who's one of my favorite actresses. I heard an interview with her after she had been acting for 20 years and she had 2 children. She's like, yeah, I used to do all this prep work and now I just show up on set. And I was thinking to myself, yeah, but your 20 years of intense prep work was the prep. That means that now you show up on set. And also, I'm sure she was exaggerating as well when she said just show up on set. But
she just speed reads it and knows everything and instinctually really quickly. But you peek at everything, I'm sure.
Yeah, all that work that goes into the craft as you're building it then becomes a part of your instrument.
Yeah. 100%.
Which is why Meisner said it takes 20 years to become an actor, because no matter how hard you're working at it, I think his point was that it takes 20 years before it integrates into your body and becomes naturally what you do and who you are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is
all right.
This is
profound. Hashtag profound. Now at the end, everyone's like, oh my God, she just used a hashtag. I'm like, yeah, I did. You're welcome.
A hashtag in your speech, a winky face in your Zoom name. We are
no one needed to know that winky face in the Zoom name.
No,
you just aired that.
They did. Sarah needed to share that before this interview concluded.
Jen, thank you so much for being here today, for your humor and your insights. I very much appreciate it.
Yeah, it was a real fun time. I don't know if anyone could tell, but I had a great time being here.
Thanks so much for listening to Crafting Audiobooks. We've been your hosts, Sarah Beth Goer
and Jennifer Jill Araya,
wishing you happy audiobook listening and or crafting.
Bye for now.